Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, starring Oscar Isaac, Jacob Elordi, Mia Goth, and Christoph Waltz. And I already said who it's directed by, so it's obvious that you know. So, welcome back, Guillermo del Toro. After I reviewed his filmography leading up to The Shape of Water, and I did Nightmare Alley and his Pinocchio, and now I'm back for the fourth time with his Frankenstein. And And this is based on a book by Mary Shelley, whom I never read, and I haven't seen. Maybe I've seen the movies, I just don't remember. But I probably will have to when I discuss The Bride that's coming out in March. So in the meantime, let's get to this Frankenstein, shall we? In the middle of the iced ocean in 1857, we get a man ship named Captain Anderson refusing to give his men lunch breaks while they haven't eaten in days and wants to get the ship moving, which seems hard as nighttime comes and an explosion comes. And the men go to where the explosion is at and finds a wounded Victor Frankenstein, played by Oscar Isaac. As they hear his mother, the creature, his monster, the creature, played by Jacob Elordi, roaring, and I primarily don't know him from anything as this actor is tall, which is appropriate for Frankenstein's monster, which is a good casting choice as he beats up on the ship's crew in order to get to Victor, and he does climb up to get only shot at in the ice cold water, which doesn't kill him, by the way, as there's no way to kill the creature, as he's strong as hell. And he pushes the ship into the water almost and completely until he gets in the iced water. And this opener was very good and very intense at the same time. And we move on to Captain Anderson as Victor, coming to Victor as he tells his story, starting with when he was a kid. And I really like the cinematography, as director Guillermo del Toro can make a movie look beautiful, like he's done in so many of his movies, like The Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth, and not one of my favorite works of his, in my opinion, but Nightmare Alley. But he knows how to show great shots in his movies, even if they're not good movies like Nightmare Alley and Pan's Labyrinth. Also in my opinion, we go back to Victor as a young boy in 1815, as his mother was sick and his father Leopold, played by Alien Three's Charles Dance, who's like Victor is in the story, he treats Victor differently as his mother Claire, played by Mia Goth, whom I reviewed before in the X trilogy, was playing a game with Victor until she has tuberculosis and unfortunately passes away, and spends more time with his father Leopold and his brother William until Leopold dies. And I watched this twice for this review and might not need to see it again because I was confused to what the fuck is happening at this point in the story, as this is a little too long for a 2.5 hour movie, as I didn't think that was necessary in my opinion. We move on to Victor as an adult in 1853, giving a presentation to a classroom, and he shows off his project of how to bring the dead back to life, as he does, and people call it a trickery. And Victor proves it's not, as he's explained that it's the as this is the future, and the professors think it's unholy, and it shows only half of his body. And there's a good reason this is an R-rated movie, as Victor leaves and meets with a man named Harlander, played by Christoph Waltz, whom I haven't seen in a movie in a long time, and wants to partner up with Victor during his invention is brilliant. And I really like the characters, as Del Toro does a great job with giving us relatable characters, and the actors were tremendous in their roles. Harlander wants to desperately partner up with Victor, and Victor says he'll consider it. And we move on to Victor encountering William, as he also meets Harlander's niece Elizabeth, also played by Mia Goth, as she's amused by what Victor is proposing. And they get to know each other at the dinner table when Harlander and William get out of the room, the ballroom scene or whatever the hell that is. And their chemistry was actually pretty good, but not my favorite thing, generally speaking, as I've come to realize I'm unsure. I don't think I'm a fan of Mia Goth as an actress in general, as I like the couple of the X films, and I'm thinking I'm not a fan of hers because, like I said just a second ago, between Pearl and Infinity Pool, which I've never seen, but with X and Maxine, and now she might have to impress me with when I see her again in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. But here, sometimes when that comes up in July, but here she's sometimes the chemistry between her and Oscar Isaac was a little flat as a love story. Meanwhile, Victor thinks of partnering up with Harlander, and honestly, the other performers are great, but the thing that comes off a little ruinous, in my opinion, is Mia Goth, as it's very hard to not come off against her. But I'll have to see like I said, have to see the Odyssey that's coming in July to figure out if she's ruinous or not. And if I like her as, and I don't like her as an actress, but for now, I just kind of come off as a hater as of hers. Victor, Harlander, and William work together while Victor and Elizabeth romance each other as we get a lot of back and forth between these scenes as it takes too long and it takes a while to get to the scenes with Frankenstein's monster. But don't get me wrong, these scenes are gorgeously shot and as the production design and set decoration was well done as this movie is well made. Victor tests his machine to see if they made it more powerful than before to keep a whole human alive as they look for a human being that feels tall and is dead. And the score by Alexandre Desplat is actually a very good score, but not as good as The Shape of Water and the Grand Budapest Hotel, in my opinion, as they test one body after another, and suddenly a storm comes up, and I did think a couple of times, where the hell is Igor? And I thought that was his assistant, right? As they didn't stick with that from the book, and I guess tell me I'm wrong in the comments. I'm not sure, and I guess I've been hearing things about how they didn't put some things in from Mary Shelley's book into this movie. I wouldn't know anything about it as I never read the book, and while Oscar Isaac does do a good job with the character of Victor Frankenstein, but the guy seems kind of like an ass. While Harlander begs Victor, to not perform the power of creating a monster, or else he'll drop the plans, as he does and gets himself killed over it, which is sudden enough for the death of Christoph Waltz, as he was a great actor. And there were times I was confused for half the movie, as I've watched it twice for this review, which is really interesting. The creature is born a monster as it breathes and wakes up while Victor is asleep and makes the same movements as Victor, like a lot of these Guillermo del Toro monster movies, as it discovers they're the same as Victor, introduces himself to the creature and learns sunlight, fire, and water, amongst other things, and he learns to walk and traps the creature in chains as well as he gives him a blanket. And one problem I have is it took this long to get to the creature of this movie, as I'm a little over an hour into the movie, and Victor learns to shave its face, and it accidentally cuts its own hand. And there are some great shots in these scenes, as well as on a lot of the movie. Elizabeth and William come in a carriage to Victor's house, while Victor has the creature in chains as he goes crazy in the treats, and he treats the creature like an animal. And I'm thinking, come on, it's a fucking human being as a monster, and I'm I'm like, don't treat it like an animal, and I'm gonna go with it for the rest of the show, as it lives like a human being. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and William arrive at the house, as Elizabeth looks for Harlander, excuse me, as she learns he's dead, but meets the creature for the first time ever. And kudos to Jacob Elordi, as he's very good as the monster of Frankenstein, as I'll review him again in Ridley Scott's The Dog Stars. And I've only seen one episode of Euphoria, whatever the frickin' hell that show is called, with Zendaya. I might need to see him more of how I feel about him in that show, but he plays a monster quite well, as he's perfect as far as his acting and his height is concerned. Elizabeth introduces herself to the creature, as his movements and facial expressions were quite well done, as the acting was so good in this movie. Victor treats the creature like an animal again, which feels very problematic, as he asks for its legs, and it suddenly roars and shouts Victor's name, which makes Victor look like an ass, as he sends Elizabeth and William out of the house while he continuously tortures the creature. And Elizabeth is worried Victor is going to kill the creature, while he says Victor and Elizabeth And suddenly he burns the house down with the creature inside as he fears he made a mistake putting the creature back into life when he tries to go back, but he can't get to it on time as Elizabeth and William see the explosion. And we get back to the ship as we have a couple of times during the movie as the creature comes inside the captain's office or bridge or something like that. And he says he's told his tale, so let me tell mine. And we get to the creature's point of view when the fire burns down the house with the creature getting out of it. And I like alive, and I like how we start with the creature's point of view, as that was a good choice by Guillermo del Toro. The creature wakes up and sees the burning house from where he's at and goes into the forest and gets some clothes as it is encountered by a deer and feeds its berries as well as himself until a couple of hunters kill the deer and hit the creature, and it hides while it feels cold and gets inside a farm to keep itself warm and comfortable. As some farmers get back to their farm and they meet an old blind man played by Mr. Filch from Harry Potter himself, David Bradley, and the creature watches him while keeping his distance, and it did take a while to see how he hides out in a farm. And like I said before, this movie's a little too long, and the editing needed to be dialed down at some points. Wolves attack the sheep at the farm while the creature remained inside, wanting to do something, but it can't. While the male farmer killer kills, excuse me, not farmer killer, male farmer kills a wolf or two and decides to get out to shoot them bastards down, which reminds me of how I feel about coyotes, all those evil motherfucking bastards. Back to the review. As the blind man meets the creature as he acts friendly to it and become good friends with him and between the blind man and Frankenstein. And for what little that David Bradley does in this movie, he is just as good as he was in Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio and Harry Potter, as he shows the creature as it has never seen snow before in its whole life. And that was a beautiful story from the creature itself. The creature goes back to the house of Victor as it sees it's deserted, and it picks up some paperwork of Victor and finds where Victor is at. When the creature gets back, wolves attack the blind man, and the creature fights them back, and it kills a couple of wolves and scares the others off. And unfortunately, the blind man dies from the attack of the wolves, and his last words saying to the creature, "You're a good man and you're my friend." And the farmers come in and shoot at the creature, and it runs out realizing it's when the people show up, it's no longer welcome by the farmers, and they hunt it some more and briefly kill it off until nighttime comes, and it wakes up not knowing how long it's been dead for, and it feels lonely as we get back to it, telling the story to Victor, and we see a fantastic image of another monster that isn't the creature, which was a dream of Victor's, when he wakes up and gets a word from William, and I believe they celebrate a wedding of Victor and Elizabeth, and the movie looks great for a monster movie, just like any of Guillermo del Toro's works. While getting married to Elizabeth, Victor is approached by the creature as it wants to kill him for treating it horribly and says we can bring monsters together and talk about death, as the creature learns Victor made a mistake creating it in the first place, and it throws Victor all over the fucking place as Elizabeth walks in on the creature while Victor gets a pistol and aims at the creature, but Elizabeth gets in the way of the shot and kills her. And well, Victor kills her, I'll say. And Victor says it attacked her while it was protecting her. And sound familiar to, well, actually, this came first, so what the hell am I talking about? And the creature holds Elizabeth while William is dying as he calls Victor the monster, in which, in that case, he is, as the creature puts Elizabeth in the cold snow while she dies there. And Victor comes with a gun, and the creature crushes him, not to death, telling him to kill it as it leaves, and Victor goes after it and sees it bleed, and it makes sense as it's somewhat what happened to this in the story of Frankenstein. Victor led some dogs to go after the creature, and he gets closer with the dogs barking at it, and the creature approaches and attacks Victor and drags him out, with Victor pulling out a knife, but it stabs him as it lights dynamite, and that's when the explosion happens from the beginning of the movie. And It roars with the crew hearing everything as the creature is still on the captain's bridge. As Victor begs it to kill him, and Victor does say his last words and dies with the creature forgiving him and taking Victor's dead body away from the ship as the creature sends the ship on its way by breaking the ice, and Captain Anderson decides to get the crew back home and the creature looking at the sunrise. And the climax was decent, but how decent? Let's talk about it in a rating, shall we? I'll give this movie a 7.0 out of 10. It is a good film, but at the same time, a little too long. But I really like the cinematography as the shots made this look beautiful. Like my personal favorite of his, The Shape of Water, to not, in my opinion, as good as movies like Pan's Labyrinth and Nightmare Alley. And there were some things shown in this movie that wasn't very necessary, but I really like the characters, as director Guillermo del Toro does a great job at giving the audience relatable characters, and the actors were tremendous in their roles. The chemistry between Oscar Isaac and Mia Goth comes off a little flat, and maybe it's not her fault, but Mia Goth comes off ruinous of this movie despite I like this movie. It's hard to come off as a hater of Ms. Goth, but I'll test that when I get to Christopher Nolan's upcoming film, The Odyssey, this summer. But the movie is gorgeously shot, as this movie is as it's well made, while the production design and the set decoration was well done. And there were times the movie sort of confused me as to what the fuck was going on in some points in the movie in time. Despite I watched this twice for this review, and the score by Alexandre Desplat was very good, but not as good as The Shape of Water and The Grand Budapest Hotel, in my opinion. I started this movie excited to see what Guillermo del Toro has to offer from the story of Frankenstein, and when it was over, I was a little disappointed on how much I didn't like it as much as I mean, I liked the movie, but I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. But it had problems. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a recommendation for the movie, but it did it need some editing? Yes. But a lot of the movie has some great shots, as I've never seen Jacob Elordi in too much. And I feel like he plays the monster so well. He has good movements, and his facial expressions were well done, as his acting was well done in this movie. While it has problems for sure, it's actually a good movie. Maybe not my favorite film of Guillermo del Toro's, but it was decent. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for returning to Guillermo del Toro. And until he comes up with another idea for a monster film, monsters are beautiful.